If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is Jack Hayes, and I've been a park ranger at Glacier National Park for nearly a decade now. I love my job, I really do. The crisp mountain air, the stunning views, and the peace and quiet, it's all I could ask for. But lately, something's been off. It started small, just a feeling, like when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up for no reason. I'd be out on my usual rounds, checking the trails and making sure everything was in order, when suddenly I'd get this sense that I wasn't alone. I'd spin around, half expecting to see a bear or a mountain lion, but there was never anything there. Just the wind in the trees and the distant cry of an eagle. But then things started to get weirder. I'd find strange tracks in the snow, not like any animal I'd ever seen before. They were almost human-like, but way too big and with these long claw-like marks at the ends. And the cold started to feel different. It wasn't just the usual winter chill. This cold felt alive somehow, like it was watching me, following me. I tried to brush it off, tell myself I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right in my beloved park. And as the days got shorter and the nights got longer, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there in the darkness was getting closer. I just didn't know how bad things were about to get. I remember the day it all really started. It was a Tuesday, I think. The sky was gray and heavy with snow that hadn't fallen yet. I was doing my usual check of the eastern trails when I heard something that made me stop in my tracks. It was a scream, not an animal scream, but a human one. It echoed through the trees, making my heart race. I've dealt with lost hikers before, but this was different. The scream sounded scary, really scary. I radioed back to base, telling them I was going to check it out. As I moved deeper into the woods, the air got colder, way colder than it should have been. My breath came out in big white puffs, and I could feel the chill seeping through my thick jacket. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like bony fingers. I kept my eyes peeled and my ears open, but everything was quiet now, too quiet. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. Then I saw it, a backpack, torn to shreds, lying in the snow. Next to it was a trail of footprints, but they didn't look right. They were too big, and they led off into a part of the park that was off limits to hikers. I stood there, my hand on my radio, not sure what to do. Part of me wanted to follow those tracks, to find out what happened. But another part, a part I'd never felt before, was screaming at me to turn back, to run. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the beginning of something big, something scary, something that would change everything I thought I knew about Glacier National Park. I took a deep breath and decided to follow the strange footprints. My job was to keep people safe, and someone might be in trouble. As I walked, the forest got darker and the trees seemed to lean in closer. The only sound was the crunch of snow under my boots. After about 10 minutes, I came to a clearing. What I saw there made my blood run cold. In the middle of the clearing was a circle of ice, perfectly smooth like a mirror. Around it, the snow was all messed up, like there had been a big fight. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. That's when I noticed something in the ice. I leaned in for a better look and almost fell over in shock. There, frozen under the surface, was a human hand. I stumbled back, my mind racing. This wasn't normal. This wasn't anything I'd been trained for. I grabbed my radio with shaking hands and called for backup. "This is Ranger Hayes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need help out here, and bring the police." As I waited, I couldn't take my eyes off that hand in the ice. It looked like it was reaching out, begging for help. I wanted to do something, to break the ice and pull the person out. But deep down, I knew it was too late. The wind picked up, whistling through the trees, and for a second, I could have sworn I heard a voice in that wind, a voice that whispered, "They're coming." I hugged myself, trying to stop shaking. Whatever was happening in my park, I had a feeling it was just the beginning. The next few days were a blur. Police came and went, asking questions I couldn't answer. They broke the ice and found a body Mayes, a hiker who'd been missing for weeks. But that didn't explain the weird footprints or how the body got frozen like that. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hand reaching out from the ice, and the cold, it seemed to follow me everywhere, even inside my warm cabin. Then, about a week after I found the body, Dr. Sarah White showed up. She was a scientist from some big university, sent to study the unusual ice formation, as she called it. Dr. White was smart and curious, but there was something else about her, like she knew more than she was saying. One night, we were sitting in my cabin, drinking hot cocoa and going over maps of the park. Dr. White looked at me with serious eyes and said, "Ranger Hayes, what do you know about the history of this area?" I shrugged. "Not much beyond the usual tourist stuff." "Why?" She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because I think what's happening here isn't new. I think it's happened before." Just then, the lights flickered and went out. In the sudden darkness, I heard that whisper again, clearer this time. "They're here." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Whatever was out there in the park, it was getting closer, and I had a feeling our lives were about to change forever. Dr. White and I sat in the dark, our hearts racing. I fumbled for my flashlight and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, casting long shadows on the walls. "What do you mean it's happened before?" I whispered, my voice shaky. Dr. White pulled out an old worn book from her bag. "This is a journal from a trapper who lived here in the 1800s, she said, flipping through the pages. "He wrote about strange creatures that came with the winter, creatures that weren't human or animal." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What kind of creatures?" Before she could answer, we heard a loud crack outside, like a tree breaking. But it wasn't a tree, it was too loud, too close. We both froze, hardly daring to breathe. Then we heard it, nest-heavy footsteps crunching in the snow. They were circling the cabin. I reached for my radio, but Dr. White grabbed my arm. "Don't," she whispered. "They might hear us." The footsteps stopped right outside the window. I could see frost forming on the glass, spreading like spider webs. Then slowly, a shape appeared behind the frost. It was tall, much taller than a person, and its eyes glowed blue in the darkness. I wanted to run, to scream, to do something, but I couldn't move. I was too scared. All I could do was watch as those glowing eyes stared right at us. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the shape vanished. The frost on the window melted away like it was never there. Dr. White and I looked at each other, our faces pale with fear. We both knew that whatever was out there in the park, it wasn't just a story anymore, it was real, and it knew we were here. The next morning, Dr. White and I decided to keep what we saw a secret. Who would believe us anyway? But we knew we had to do something. We couldn't just let these things hurt more people. We spent days poring over old maps and records, trying to find any clues about what these creatures might be. Dr. White called them cryptids, nest animals that people say exist but science hasn't proven yet. One afternoon, while digging through dusty files in the ranger station, I found something strange. It was an old report from the 1950s about a bunch of hikers who went missing all at once. The weird part? It happened in the exact same area where I found that frozen body. "Sarah," I called out, my voice trembling a little. "I think I found something." She rushed over, her eyes widening as she read the report. "Jack, this is it. This is the pattern. Every 30 years or so, people start disappearing. Then the cold comes." Just then, my radio crackled to life. It was Tommy, one of the younger rangers. His voice was panicked. Jack, are you there? There's something out here, something big. I don't think it's human. I need he." The radio cut off with a burst of static. Sarah and I looked at each other, our faces pale. We both knew what we had to do. As we grabbed our gear and headed out into the fading daylight, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something bigger and scarier than we could handle. But we had no choice. Tommy needed us, and we were the only ones who knew what was really going on. The sun was setting as we stepped outside, casting long shadows across the snow. In the distance, we heard a low rumbling sound, like a growl, but deeper, much deeper. Whatever was out there, we were about to face it head on. Sarah and I trudged through the snow, following Tommy's last known location. The forest was eerily quiet, like all the animals had gone into hiding. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, but the shadows seemed to move on their own. "Jack," Sarah whispered, her breath visible in the cold air. "Look at the trees." I shined my light where she was pointing and felt my stomach drop. The trees were covered in a thin layer of ice, even though it wasn't cold enough for that. And the ice, it seemed to be spreading as we watched. We pushed on, calling out for Tommy every few minutes, but there was no answer. Just that deep, rumbling sound getting closer. Suddenly, Sarah grabbed my arm. "Did you see that?" she hissed. I followed her gaze and saw a flash of movement in the trees. Something big and white, moving faster than any animal I'd ever seen. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. "We need to find Tommy and get out of here," I said. That's when we heard it. A scream. Tommy's scream. It was coming from a clearing up ahead. We ran towards the sound, slipping on the icy ground. As we burst into the clearing, we saw Tommy. He was on the ground, crawling away from something tall and white, with glowing blue eyes. The creature turned to look at us, and I felt my blood turn to ice. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else entirely. I raised my gun with shaking hands, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't do any good. We were face to face with something out of a nightmare, and I had no idea how we were going to survive. Time seemed to freeze as we stared at the creature. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, with skin as white as snow. Its fingers ended in long, sharp claws that glinted in the moonlight. But its eyes, those glowing blue eyes, were the scariest part. They looked intelligent, almost human, but there was no warmth in them, only hunger. "Tommy, don't move," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I took a slow step forward, my gun still raised. The creature's head snapped towards me. It made a sound, like ice cracking, and I felt the temperature drop even more. My breath came out in thick white clouds. Sarah was inching towards Tommy, her eyes never leaving the creature. "We need to get out of here," she whispered. Suddenly the creature moved. It was so fast, I barely saw it. 1 second it was across the clearing, the next it was right in front of me. I fired my gun, the sound echoing through the trees, but the bullet seemed to pass right through it. "Run," I yelled, grabbing Tommy and pulling him to his feet. We took off into the woods, the sound of heavy footsteps and cracking ice right behind us. We ran harder than we ever had before, branches whipping our faces, the cold air burning our lungs. I could hear Sarah panting beside me, Tommy stumbling behind. Then I heard a thud and a cry. Tommy had fallen. I spun around, ready to go back for him, but what I saw made my heart stop. The creature had Tommy by the leg. Its claws were sinking into his skin, and I could see frost spreading from where it touched him. Tommy's eyes were wide with terror as he reached out to us. "Help me," he screamed. "Please, don't let it take me." I had to make a choice, and fast. The creature was pulling Tommy away, and Sarah was tugging at my arm, urging me to run. Whatever I decided would change everything. I felt my heart racing as I stood there, torn between saving Tommy and running for our lives. I couldn't let him go, not like this, but the creature was right there, its glowing eyes locked onto me. I knew we were in deep trouble. "Jack, we have to go," Sarah shouted, her voice urgent. I could see the fear in her eyes, and it made my stomach churn. "Tommy," I yelled, trying to think of something, anything. "Grab my hand." Tommy reached out, his face twisted in pain and fear. The creature tightened its grip, and I could see the frost creeping up his leg. It was now or never. I took a deep breath and ran towards him. "Hold on," I shouted as I lunged forward, grabbing his arm just as he was pulled back. With all my strength, I yanked him toward me. The creature hissed, a sound like ice scraping against metal, but I didn't look back. I pulled Tommy up and shouted to Sarah, "Run." We stumbled through the trees, the three of us moving as fast as we could, but I could hear the creature behind us. Its footsteps heavy and relentless. It was gaining on us. Over here, Sarah cried suddenly, pointing to a small cave hidden behind some bushes. Without thinking twice, we dashed toward it. We squeezed inside just as the creature burst into the clearing behind us. It stopped at the entrance of the cave, its eyes glowing like lanterns in the dark. Obsessed, we huddled together in the shadows, trying to catch our breath. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it would give me away. The creature sniffed the air outside, its claws scraping against the ground. "What do we do now?" Tommy whispered, his voice trembling. "We wait," Sarah replied quietly. "It can't get in here." But deep down I wasn't so sure. The cave felt small and cramped, and every second felt like an hour as we listened to the creature pacing outside. I could feel my pulse racing. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a race against time, and whatever that thing was out there, it wasn't going to give up easily. We huddled together in the cave, listening to the creature outside. It was pacing back and forth, its footsteps echoing off the trees. Every now and then, it would stop and sniff the air, like it was trying to figure out how to get to us. Tommy was shivering, his leg throbbing in pain. Sarah was trying to keep him calm, but I could see the fear in her eyes too. I knew we couldn't stay here forever. We needed a plan. "Okay," I whispered, trying to think clearly. "We need to get out of here, but we can't go back the way we came." Sarah nodded. "There's a stream that runs through the park. If we can make it there, we might be able to follow it to safety." I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. "We'll wait until night. When it's dark, we'll make a run for the stream." Tommy looked up at me, his eyes wide with fear. "What if it sees us?" I took a deep breath. "We'll just have to be careful. We'll move quiet and fast, and if it does see us, we'll have to outrun it." The hours ticked by slowly, the darkness outside seeming to grow thicker and more menacing. But we waited, our ears tuned to the creature's movements. Finally, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in a deep, dark shadow. It was time to move. "Ready?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. Sarah nodded, her eyes locked on mine. Tommy gritted his teeth, determination etched on his face. We took a deep breath together, then slipped out of the cave into the night. The forest was silent, except for the sound of our footsteps crunching in the snow. We moved as fast and quiet as we could, our eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the creature. But as we ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that those glowing blue eyes were right behind us, waiting for their chance to strike. We ran through the darkness, our flashlights casting flickering shadows on the trees. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, and every snap of a twig made us jump. After what felt like hours, we finally saw the glint of water up ahead. The stream was frozen, but we knew it would lead us to safety if we followed it. As we reached the stream, I heard a faint rustling behind us. I spun around, my heart racing, but there was nothing there, just the wind in the trees. "Keep moving," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're almost there." We trudged along the stream, our boots crunching on the ice. The darkness seemed to press in around us, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, Tommy stumbled and fell. "My leg," he groaned, clutching at his injured leg. Sarah and I rushed to help him up. As we did, I saw something moving in the distance, a dark shape, looming over the trees. "It's coming," I whispered, my voice barely audible. We pulled Tommy to his feet and started to run again. The shape was getting closer, its presence making the air colder. I could feel its eyes on us, boring into our backs. We were running out of time. As we rounded a bend in the stream, I saw a light in the distance. It was the ranger station, our safe haven. But just as we were about to reach it, the creature burst from the trees. It was right behind us, its icy breath on our necks. I grabbed Tommy and Sarah, pulling them towards the door. We stumbled inside, just as the creature slammed into the wall, its claws scraping against the wood. We locked the door behind us, panting and trembling with fear. But as we looked at each other, I knew we weren't safe yet. Not until we were far away from this place. And then, just as we thought it was over, we heard a faint whispering outside. It was soft at first, but it grew louder, more urgent. The words became clear. "You can't escape." I felt a chill run down my spine. We had to get out of there, and fast. But as I turned to make a plan, I saw something that made my heart stop. The frost was spreading, creeping up the windows like a living thing, and in the center of it, a message was forming, written in icy letter, "You will never leave." I stared at the message on the window, my mind racing. How was this happening? The frost seemed to be moving on its own, spreading like a slow-moving wave. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Jack, we need to get out of here. Now." I nodded, still feeling like I was in a dream. We had to escape, but how? The creature was outside, and the frost was sealing us in. Tommy was limping badly, but he knew we had to move. "The radio," he said, his voice weak. "We can call for help." I rushed to the radio, flipping switches and dials, but all we got was static. The creature must have damaged it when it attacked the station. "We need another way out," I said, looking around frantically. The windows were frozen shut, and the door was the only way out. But that meant facing whatever was outside. Sarah spotted something. "The back door," she whispered, "leads to the garage. We can take a truck." I nodded. It was our only chance. We moved quietly to the back door, trying not to make any noise. As we reached it, I could feel the frost spreading, creeping under the door like a cold, dead hand. I took a deep breath, turned the handle, and pushed the door open. The garage was dark and cold, but it was empty. We made a dash for the truck, our hearts pounding in our chests. As we reached the truck, I heard a loud crash from the front of the station. The creature had broken in. We were running out of time. I started the engine, and the truck roared to life. We sped out of the garage, into the darkness of the forest. But as we drove, I could see the frost spreading, covering the trees and the road. It was like the forest itself was trying to trap us. And then, just as we thought we were safe, the truck's tires skidded on the icy road. We spun out of control, heading straight for a cliff. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The truck slid over the edge, and we were plummeting down into the darkness. Everything went silent. I was weightless, floating in midair, and then suddenly we crashed onto the snow below. I sat up, dazed and confused. The truck was wrecked, but we were alive. For now. As I looked around, I saw that we were in a small valley, surrounded by steep cliffs. And in the center of the valley, something was moving, something big. I knew then that we weren't safe yet. Not by a long shot. I helped Sarah and Tommy out of the wrecked truck. We were all shaken but alive. As we looked around, I realized we were trapped. The cliffs were too steep to climb, and the only way out was through the valley. "What's that?" Sarah whispered, pointing to the center of the valley. I followed her gaze and saw a large, dark shape moving slowly towards us. It was hard to make out what it was, but it was definitely not human. "We need to get out of here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But we can't climb the cliffs. We have to find another way." Tommy was limping badly, but he knew we had to move. "There's a cave over there," he said, pointing to a small opening in the cliff. We made a dash for the cave, the shape getting closer and closer. As we reached the entrance, I could see that it was another of those creatures. Its eyes were fixed on us, and it was moving fast. We ducked into the cave just as the creature reached the entrance. It let out a loud roar, like ice cracking, and slammed its fists against the rock. We caught our breath inside the cave, listening to the creature's angry roars. But as we looked around, I realized we weren't alone. There were old tracks on the ground, like someone had been here before. "Look," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think someone else is here?" I nodded, a glimmer of hope rising in my chest. If someone else was here, maybe they could help us. But as we moved deeper into the cave, I heard a faint whispering. It was soft at first, but it grew louder. And then I realized it wasn't just the wind. It was a voice whispering a single word over and over. "Welcome." I felt a chill run down my spine. Who or what was welcoming us, and why did it feel so wrong? As we walked deeper into the cave, the whispering grew louder. It was like someone was right next to us, but we couldn't see anyone. The air was cold and damp, and I could hear the sound of dripping water echoing off the walls. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Jack, I don't like this," she whispered. "And?" It feels like we're being led somewhere." I nodded, my heart racing. "Stay close," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Tommy was limping badly, but he kept moving. We had to find a way out of this cave and back to safety. As we turned a corner, we saw a light in the distance. It was faint, but it looked like a fire. Maybe someone was here, someone who could help us. We moved cautiously towards the light, our eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. As we got closer, I saw that it was a small fire burning in a circle of stones, and then I saw him. A man, sitting next to the fire. He was old with a long white beard and eyes that seemed to see right through us. "Welcome," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I've been waiting for you." I felt a shiver run down my spine. How did he know we were coming? And what did he want with us? The old man gestured for us to sit down. "You're safe here," he said. For now, I hesitated, unsure if we could trust him. But something about his words made me feel like we had no choice. We sat down, our eyes fixed on him. "What do you know about these creatures?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The old man leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the firelight. "I know they're not just creatures," he said. "They're something much older, something that's been awakened." I felt a chill run down my spine. What did he mean? And what did it have to do with us? But before I could ask any more questions, the old man stood up. "We need to get moving," he said. "It's not safe here. Not for much longer." I looked at Sarah and Tommy, and we all nodded. We had to trust this man if we wanted to survive. As we stood up to leave, I heard a faint rumbling sound. It was distant, but it was getting closer. "What's that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. The old man's face was grim. "It's them," he said. "They found us." I felt my heart sink. We were running out of time, and I knew that whatever was coming for us, it wouldn't stop until it had us. My name is Daniel Ortega, and I've been a park ranger here in the Everglades for nearly a decade. I thought I knew these swamps like the back of my hand, but boy was I wrong. What happened last summer changed everything I thought I knew about this place and about what's really out there in the dark waters. It all started on a muggy July morning. The air was thick and heavy, like it always is down here in Florida. I was doing my usual rounds, checking on the campsites and making sure no tourists had wandered off the trails. That's when I got the call on my radio. "Ranger Ortega, we've got a situation at Red Water Crossing. Campers reporting strange noises and something in the water. Can you check it out?" I remember thinking it was probably just some gators making a fuss, maybe scaring some city folks who weren't used to the sounds of the swamp. But something in the dispatcher's voice made me uneasy. I hopped in my boat and headed out to Red Water Crossing, not knowing I was about to step into the craziest, scariest adventure of my life. As I steered through the narrow waterways, the usual chatter of birds and insects seemed different, quieter, like the whole swamp was holding its breath. That's when I saw it, a flash of something in the water, something big, and definitely not a gator. I killed the engine and drifted closer, my heart pounding. The water rippled, and for a split second I saw, well, I'm still not sure what I saw, but it wasn't anything that should exist in these swamps, or anywhere on Earth for that matter. That was just the beginning. What happened next would test everything I thought I knew about survival, about nature, and about the thin line between our world and the unknown. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, and I'll tell you the whole story of the horror we faced in the Everglades that summer. As I got closer to Red Water Crossing, I could hear panicked voices. A group of campers were huddled on the small wooden dock, pointing at the water and talking fast. I pulled up and tied my boat, trying to look calm even though my heart was racing. "What's going on, folks?" I asked, stepping onto the dock. A woman with wild eyes grabbed my arm. "There's something out there," she said, her voice shaking. "It took our friend." I looked around, counting heads. There were 5 people on the dock, all looking scared out of their minds. "Okay, let's slow down," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Tell me exactly what happened." A tall guy with glasses spoke up. We were swimming, just cooling off. Then Jake, that's our friend, he started yelling. We thought he was joking around at first, but then, he swallowed hard. Then he went under. We didn't see him come back up. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I tried not to show it. How long ago was this? Maybe 20 minutes? The woman said, looking at her watch. Oh God, do you think he's still alive? I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the edge of the dock and peered into the water. It was murky, like always, but something felt off. The surface was too still, like nothing was moving underneath, not even small fish. That's when I saw it again, just for a second. A dark shape, way bigger than any gator I'd ever seen, gliding just under the surface. And was that a glowing spot, like a bioluminescent eye? I stepped back, my mind racing. This was way beyond anything I'd dealt with before. I needed backup, and fast. I turned to the campers. Okay, here's what we're going to do. You all are going to get in my boat and head back to the ranger station. I'm going to call for help and start searching for your friend. They started to argue, but I held up my hand. This isn't a discussion. It's not safe here, and I need you out of the area so we can work. As I helped them into my boat, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Something was out there in the water, something that shouldn't exist, and I had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning of our troubles. After I sent the campers off, I radioed for backup. This is Ranger Ortega at Red Water Crossing. We've got a missing swimmer, and something unusual in the water. I need all available units here ASAP. While waiting, I paced the dock, keeping my eyes on the water. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky orange and red. Usually I loved this time of day in the Everglades, but now the growing shadows made me nervous. Suddenly, I heard a splash. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the dim light. There, about 20 feet from the dock, I saw a hand reaching out of the water. Jake? I called out, my heart pounding. Is that you? The hand disappeared under the surface. Without thinking, I dove in. The water was warm and thick, like soup. I swam to where I'd seen the hand, took a deep breath, and went under. At first, I couldn't see anything in the murky water. Then my light caught something. It wasn't Jake. It wasn't human at all. Two huge, glowing eyes stared back at me. They belonged to, I don't know what. It was big, bigger than any animal I'd ever seen in these swamps. Its skin looked slimy and pale, almost see-through, and its mouth, oh God. Its mouth was full of teeth, row after row of them. I kicked back to the surface, gasping for air. My mind was racing. What was that thing? And where was Jake? Just then, I heard the sound of boat engines. Backup was finally arriving. As I swam back to the dock, I realized my life was about to change forever. Whatever was in these waters, it wasn't natural, and it was up to us to stop it before more people got hurt. I pulled myself onto the dock just as the first boat arrived. What's the situation, Ortega? My colleague Sarah called out. I took a deep breath. You're not going to believe this, I said, but we've got a real monster on our hands. As I explained what I saw to Sarah and the other rangers, their faces went from confused to worried. Nobody wanted to say it, but we all knew this was way beyond our usual job of dealing with gators and lost hikers. We need to call in the experts, Sarah said, pulling out her phone. I know a marine biologist who might be able to help us figure out what this thing is. While she made the call, I briefed the others on what happened. We decided to split up into teams to search the area. Safety in numbers, you know? As night fell, we turned on our big searchlights. The beams cut through the darkness, making weird shadows on the water. Every ripple made us jump. We were all on edge, knowing that something dangerous was out there. Hours passed with no sign of Jake or the creature. Then around midnight, we heard a scream coming from the far side of the crossing. That's Tom's team. I shouted, and we raced our boats towards the sound. When we got there, we found Tom's boat empty, drifting in circles. There was no sign of Tom or his partner, Lisa. Tom, Lisa. We called out, our voices echoing in the night. No answer. Suddenly, something bumped my boat hard. I almost fell overboard. Sarah grabbed my arm to steady me. What was that? She whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Before I could answer, we saw it. A huge pale shape rose out of the water just yards away. It was the creature I'd seen earlier. But now I could see all of it. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Part fish, part something else. Its skin glowed faintly in the dark, and those terrible eyes stared right at us. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then the creature let out a roar that shook the air itself. We all froze, too scared to move. That's when I realized this wasn't just about finding Jake anymore. We were in a fight for survival against something that shouldn't exist, and I had no idea how we were going to win. The creature lunged at our boat, its massive jaws snapping just inches from Sarah's arm. I grabbed the steering wheel and gunned the engine, speeding away as fast as we could. "We need to get out of here," Sarah yelled over the roar of the motor. But I knew we couldn't just leave. Tom and Lisa were still out there somewhere, and maybe Jake too. We had to do something. As we raced across the water, I saw lights in the distance. It was the ranger station, our safe haven in this nightmare. An idea hit me. "Sarah, radio the station. Tell them to turn on all the lights they can. My spotlights, floodlights, everything." She looked at me like I was crazy, but did it anyway. Within minutes, the far shore lit up like daytime. The creature, which had been chasing us, suddenly dove deep, as if scared by the light. That's when it clicked. "It doesn't like bright light," I shouted. "Quick, shine your flashlight in the water." We all did, and sure enough, we saw a huge shape moving away from the beams. It was our first advantage against this thing. Just then, we heard splashing nearby. Our lights revealed Tom and Lisa, clinging to a fallen tree in the water. They looked terrified but alive. "Hold on," I called out. "We're coming to get you." As we carefully approached, I kept my light trained on the water around us. The creature was still out there. I could feel it. But for now, the light was keeping it at bay. We managed to pull Tom and Lisa into the boat. They were shaking and covered in cuts, but okay. That thing," Tom stuttered. "It came out of nowhere, grabbed Lisa first, but I managed to pull her back. Then it went for me." "Save it for later," I said, not unkindly. "Right now, we need to get back to the station and regroup." As we sped towards safety, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. We'd found a weakness in the creature, but we still didn't know what it was, where it came from, or how to stop it. And somewhere out in the dark waters, Jake was still missing. I made a silent promise to find him, no matter what it took. Little did I know, our night of terror was just beginning. Back at the ranger station, we huddled around the radio, waiting for news from the marine biologist Sarah had called. The room was tense, everyone jumping at every little sound from outside. Finally, the radio crackled to life. "This is Dr. Jennifer Lawrence. I'm on my way to your location. Can you describe what you've seen?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. The size of the creature, its glowing skin, those rows of teeth. When I mentioned how it seemed afraid of bright light, she got really interested. "That's fascinating," Dr. Lawrence said. "It sounds like a deep-sea creature, but much larger than anything we've ever recorded. I have some theories, but I need to see it for myself." Just then we heard a loud bang from outside. Everyone froze. "What was that?" Sarah whispered. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly opened the door. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, in the beam of my light, I spotted something that made my blood run cold. There, on the wooden deck of the station, was a large, slimy footprint. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Midas webbed toes and sharp claw marks. "It's been here," I said, my voice shaking a little. The creature, it came out of the water. The realization hit us all at once. We weren't safe, even on land. This thing could come after us anywhere. "We need to evacuate," I said, turning to the others. "Get everyone out of the park now." As we scrambled to alert other rangers and campers, I couldn't shake a terrifying thought. If this creature could come on land, how many more were out there? And what would happen if they spread beyond the Everglades? I looked out at the dark swamp, knowing that somewhere out there, a monster was waiting, and we were the only ones who could stop it. The night was far from over, and I had a feeling things were about to get a whole lot worse. As we rushed to evacuate everyone from the park, the sky lit up with flashes of lightning. A storm was rolling in, making everything even more dangerous. "Great," I muttered. "Just what we need." We split into teams, each taking a different area of the park. Sarah and I headed to the campgrounds near Red Water Crossing. The rain was coming down hard now, making it hard to see. As we approached the first campsite, we heard screams. We ran towards the sound, our flashlights bouncing wildly. There in the clearing was chaos. Tents were torn apart, and campers were running in all directions. And in the middle of it all was the creature, its pale body glistening in the rain. "Hey!" I yelled, shining my light directly at it. The creature hissed and backed away, shielding its eyes. "Everyone this way," Sarah shouted, waving the terrified campers towards us. As people ran past us, I kept my light on the monster. It was angry now, snapping its jaws and making a horrible screeching noise. Suddenly, a little girl tripped and fell. The creature turned towards her, ready to pounce. Without thinking, I ran forward. "Sarah, get them out of here," I yelled, picking up the girl and backing away slowly. The creature followed, its glowing eyes fixed on us. I could hear its heavy breathing, smell its fishy stench. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Just when I thought we were done for, headlights appeared behind us. It was Dr. Lawrence, arriving just in time. The creature roared in pain as the bright lights hit it. It turned and slithered back into the swamp, disappearing into the dark water. As Dr. Lawrence helped us into her truck, I knew we had just barely escaped, but the night was far from over, and now we had a scientist who might be able to help us understand what we were up against. I looked at the scared little girl in my arms and the frightened campers huddled in the back of the truck. I made a silent promise to keep them safe, no matter what it took. As we drove back to the ranger station, lightning illuminated the swamp. For a second, I thought I saw more shapes moving in the water. I hoped I was wrong, but deep down, I knew our troubles were just beginning. Back at the ranger station, Dr. Lawrence set up her equipment quickly. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. As she worked, she fired questions at us about everything we'd seen. "These creatures," she said, looking up from her computer. "They're not supposed to be here. They're deep-sea dwellers, adapted to extreme pressure and darkness. Something's forced them to the surface." A loud crack of thunder made us all jump. The storm was getting worse. "But what could make them come up?" Sarah asked, voicing what we were all thinking. Dr. Lawrence frowned. "I have a theory, but I hope I'm wrong. We need to check the water temperature and salinity levels. If I'm right, we're dealing with something much bigger than just a few monsters." Just then, my radio crackled. It was one of the other rangers. "Ortega, we've got a problem at the flood control gates. They're jammed open, and salt water's pouring in." I felt my stomach drop. This was bad. Really bad. Dr. Lawrence's eyes widened. "That's it. The saltwater intrusion is changing the ecosystem. It's driving these creatures out of their deep water homes and into the shallows." "But why now?" I asked. "The gates have malfunctioned before." She shook her head. "It's not just the gates' climate change. Rising sea levels, pollution. It's all coming together to create a perfect storm, and these creatures are just the first sign of it." Another crack of thunder, closer this time. The lights in the station flickered. "We need to close those gates," I said, grabbing my gear. "It might not solve everything, but it's a start." As I headed for the door, Dr. Lawrence called out, "Be careful, there might be more of them out there now. And they're getting desperate." I nodded, trying to look braver than I felt. As I stepped out into the raging storm, I knew we were in for the fight of our lives, but we had to try. The fate of the Everglades, and maybe much more, was in our hands. The rain pelted my face as I made my way to the boat. In the distance, I heard an inhuman roar over the thunder. They were out there, waiting, and I was heading right for them. I steered the boat through the choppy waters, rain lashing against my face. Every flash of lightning made me flinch, worried I'd see one of those creatures nearby. The flood control gates weren't far, but it felt like the longest ride of my life. As I got closer, I saw the problem. The gates were stuck wide open, and murky seawater was rushing in. This was changing the swamp, making it a place where those monsters could live. I tied up the boat and climbed onto the platform. The control panel was sparking, damaged by the storm. I tried the emergency shutoff, but nothing happened. "Come on," I muttered, hitting buttons frantically. That's when I heard it, Myas, a low growl behind me. I spun around, heart pounding. There, crawling up from the water, was one of the creatures. Its pale skin gleamed in the rain, those terrible eyes fixed right on me. I backed up, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. My hand found a metal pipe. Not much, but better than nothing. The creature lunged. I swung the pipe, catching it on the side of its head. It screeched in pain but came at me again. We wrestled on the platform, dangerously close to the edge. One slip, and I'd fall into the rushing water, right where it wanted me. Suddenly, another boat appeared through the rain. It was Sarah and Dr. Lawrence. "Daniel," Sarah yelled, "use this." She threw something that glinted in the air. I caught it, Myas. A flare gun. Of course. The creatures hated bright light. As the monster came at me again, I aimed and fired. The flare hit it square in the face, exploding in a burst of red light. The creature howled and fell back into the water, disappearing beneath the surface. Panting, I turned to Sarah and Dr. Lawrence as they climbed up. "Thanks for the save, but we still need to close these gates." Dr. Lawrence examined the control panel. "The circuit's fried. We'll have to close it manually." I nodded, knowing what that meant. Someone would have to stay behind to crank the gates shut. It was dangerous, with more creatures surely on the way. I took a deep breath. "I'll do it. You two get back and warn everyone. This isn't over yet." As they reluctantly agreed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this might be the last job I ever did as a park ranger. But if it meant saving the Everglades and stopping these monsters, it would be worth it. I gripped the manual crank and started to turn, muscles straining. In the distance, I heard more inhuman roars. They were coming, and I was the only thing standing between them and the world beyond the swamp. As I cranked the gates, sweat dripped down my face, mixing with the rain. It was slow going, but I knew I had to keep moving. Every turn of the crank brought the gates closer together, blocking the flow of salt water into the swamp. Just as I was making progress, I heard a splash behind me. I spun around, ready for another fight. But this time it wasn't just one creature. There were three of them, their glowing eyes fixed on me. I grabbed the flare gun, my heart racing. I had only a few flares left, and I needed to make them count. The creatures moved closer, their jaws open wide. I aimed and fired, hitting one right in the face. It let out a deafening screech and fell back into the water. But the other two kept coming. I fired again, missing one by inches. It lunged at me, and I barely dodged its snapping jaws. That's when I remembered something. The manual crank was attached to a long metal rod. It might not be perfect, but it was better than nothing. I grabbed the rod and swung it hard, hitting one creature on the side. It stumbled back, giving me just enough time to fire my last flare. This one hit its target perfectly, sending the creature tumbling into the water. But the third one was still coming. I swung the rod again and again, trying to keep it at bay. My arms were tired, and I knew I couldn't keep this up much longer. Just when I thought I was done for, I heard the sound of engines. It was Sarah and Dr. Lawrence, returning with backup. The creatures saw them too and hesitated. That was all the time I needed. With one final push, I closed the gates, shutting off the flow of salt water. As the creatures slid back into the darkness, I collapsed against the gate, exhausted. We'd done it. We'd stopped them from spreading. But as I looked out into the stormy night, I knew this wasn't the end. We still had to find Jake and figure out how to deal with these creatures for good. And then, just as I was catching my breath, I heard a faint cry for help. It was a voice I recognized, Jake's. "Jake," I shouted back, hope rising in my chest. "Where are you?" There was no answer, but I knew I had to find him. Now, I turned to Sarah and Dr. Lawrence. We need to move. Jake's out there and we can't leave him. Without hesitation, we set off into the stormy night, determined to rescue Jake and face whatever dangers lay ahead. We pushed through the storm, our flashlights casting eerie shadows on the water. Every now and then, we'd call out Jake's name, hoping he'd answer. As we navigated through the narrow channels, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The creatures might have retreated, but I knew they could come back at any moment. Suddenly, Dr. Lawrence grabbed my arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Do you hear that?" We all stopped, listening. At first, there was nothing. Then, faintly, we heard it mayest, a faint splashing sound. "That's Jake," Sarah exclaimed, her voice barely above a whisper. We moved cautiously towards the sound, our lights scanning the water, and then we saw him. Jake was clinging to a cypress tree, his eyes wide with fear. "Jake," I called out softly, not wanting to scare him further. He looked up, relief washing over his face. "Daniel. Thank God." We carefully pulled him into the boat, checking him for injuries. He was shaken but okay. As we headed back to the ranger station, the storm finally began to clear. The sky was still dark, but the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Back at the station, we huddled around a hot fire, trying to warm up and calm down. Jake told us his story, Nitu, how he'd been dragged underwater, only managing to escape when the creature let him go. Dr. Lawrence listened intently, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "This changes everything," she said. "These creatures aren't just mindless beasts, they're intelligent, and they're adapting to their new environment." I frowned, not liking the sound of that. "What does it mean?" Dr. Lawrence leaned forward. "It means we have a bigger problem on our hands. These creatures could spread beyond the Everglades, and if they do, we might not be able to stop them." The fire crackled, casting shadows on our faces. We all knew what we had to do next. We had to stop these creatures before it was too late. But as I looked out into the darkness, I couldn't help but wonder, were we already too late? We spent the rest of the night planning our next move. Dr. Lawrence explained that we needed to find out where these creatures were coming from and how to stop them for good. As the sun began to rise, we set off in a convoy of boats, heading deeper into the Everglades. The air was cool and misty, a welcome change from the stormy night. We moved quietly, scanning the water for any sign of the creatures. Dr. Lawrence had brought special equipment to test the water and see if we could find any clues about where they were coming from. As we approached a particularly narrow channel, I noticed something odd. The water seemed to be churning, like something was moving beneath the surface. "Wait," I whispered, holding up my hand. We all stopped, listening, and then we heard it. A low rumbling sound, like thunder, but it wasn't coming from the sky. "What is that?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Lawrence's eyes were wide. "I think it's them. They're gathering somewhere." We moved forward cautiously, our lights scanning the water. As we turned a bend in the channel, we saw a massive underwater cave, hidden beneath the mangroves. The rumbling sound was coming from inside. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before. "This is it," Dr. Lawrence said, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and fear. "This is where they're coming from." We exchanged nervous glances. We knew what we had to do next. We had to go inside that cave and face whatever was waiting for us. But as we prepared to dive in, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap, and once we went in, there was no turning back. We geared up with scuba equipment, trying to stay calm despite the fear growing inside us. Dr. Lawrence handed out special underwater lights that would help us see in the dark cave. "Remember, these creatures don't like bright light," she reminded us. "Stay close, and keep your lights on them if they come near." As we slipped into the water, the coolness enveloped us. We swam towards the cave entrance, our lights casting an eerie glow on the rocks. Inside the cave, it was pitch black except for our lights. The water was murky, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. We swam deeper, the sound of our breathing echoing off the walls. Suddenly I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I spun around, shining my light in that direction. A creature was staring back at me, its eyes glowing in the dark. I froze, my heart racing, but I didn't move. I just kept my light on it, trying to stay calm. The creature didn't attack. It seemed to be studying us, like it was curious. Lawrence swam closer, her eyes fixed on the creature. "This is incredible," she whispered. "They're not just mindless beasts, they're intelligent." As we watched, more creatures appeared, all of them watching us with an unnerving intensity. We knew we had to be careful. One wrong move could trigger an attack. But for now, they just floated there, their glowing eyes fixed on us. It was like they were waiting for something. And then I realized what it was. They were waiting for us to make the next move. We had to decide whether to try and communicate with them or get out of there as fast as we could. The problem was, I wasn't sure which option was safer. We stayed frozen, unsure of what to do next. Dr. Lawrence slowly raised her hand, holding out a small device. It was an underwater camera, and she began to take pictures of the creatures. They didn't react, just kept watching us with those unblinking eyes. It was like they were trying to understand us, just as much as we were trying to understand them. Sarah whispered, "What are you doing, Dr. Lawrence?" "I'm trying to gather evidence," she replied softly. "We need to know more about these creatures if we're going to stop them." As she continued to take pictures, I noticed something strange. The creatures were starting to move closer, their eyes fixed on the camera. Suddenly, one of them reached out with a long, slimy arm. It touched the camera, and for a moment I thought it was going to grab it, but instead it just seemed to be examining it, like it was curious about this strange object. Dr. Lawrence held her breath, not moving. "It's interacting with us," she whispered. "This is incredible." The creature pulled its arm back, and the others began to move closer. They were surrounding us now, their eyes still fixed on us. I felt a shiver run down my spine. This was both amazing and terrifying. We were making contact with creatures that shouldn't exist. But as we floated there, surrounded by these alien-like beings, I realized that we might have a chance to learn from them. And maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to coexist, or so I hoped. Just then, one of the creatures made a strange noise. It was almost like a click, followed by a series of high-pitched whistles. Dr. Lawrence's eyes lit up. "It's communicating with us," she whispered.
"This is it."
"We might actually be able to talk to them." As we listened, the creature repeated the sounds. It was like it was trying to tell us something. But what? And how were we supposed to understand? Dr. Lawrence pulled out a small device from her bag. It was a recorder, and she began to play back the creature's sounds. Then, she pressed another button, and the device started to make similar noises. The creatures looked at each other, seemingly surprised. One of them responded with the same clicks and whistles. "It's working," Dr. Lawrence whispered, her eyes shining with excitement. "We're communicating with them." We watched in awe as the creatures began to interact with the device. They were learning from us, and we were learning from them. But as we continued to communicate, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were playing with fire. These creatures were powerful and unpredictable. What if they decided they didn't want to be friends anymore? Just then, the creature that had first touched the camera swam closer. It looked at me, and for a moment, I felt like it was trying to tell me something. Dr. Lawrence noticed it too. "I think it wants to show us something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The creature turned and swam deeper into the cave. We followed, our lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. As we swam further in, the water began to get colder. I could feel a current pulling us along, like we were being swept into a hidden world. Suddenly, we emerged into a vast underwater chamber. The ceiling disappeared into darkness, and the walls were lined with glowing plants. In the center of the room, I saw something that made my heart stop. A massive, ancient-looking door covered in strange symbols. The creature swam up to the door and touched it with its arm. The symbols began to glow, and the door slowly creaked open. "What is this?" Sarah whispered, her voice full of wonder. Dr. Lawrence shook her head. I don't know, but I think we're about to find out. As we swam through the doorway, I felt like we were stepping into a whole new world, a world that was full of secrets and dangers, and I couldn't help but wonder, were we ready for what was on the other side? As we swam through the doorway, the water around us changed. It became clearer, and I could see fish darting through the plants. The air was filled with a soft, blue glow, like the whole place was lit up from within. The creatures led us deeper into the chamber, their movements slow and deliberate. We followed, our lights casting shadows on the walls. Suddenly, we found ourselves in a huge, underwater city. There were buildings made of coral and stone, covered in glowing plants. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Dr. Lawrence gasped. This is incredible. It's an ancient civilization. The creatures swam up to a large structure in the center of the city. They gestured for us to follow. As we approached, I saw that it was some kind of temple. The entrance was guarded by two massive stone statues, their faces stern and unyielding. The creatures swam past the statues and into the temple. We followed, our hearts pounding with excitement and fear. Inside, the temple was filled with strange artifacts and symbols. The creatures began to arrange themselves around a large, glowing crystal. Dr. Lawrence whispered, I think they're trying to communicate with us again. The crystal began to glow brighter, and the creatures started to make their clicking noises. It was like they were trying to tell us something important. Suddenly, the crystal flashed brightly, and everything went silent. The creatures looked at us, their eyes serious. I felt a shiver run down my spine. What were they trying to tell us? And why did it feel so urgent? As we stood there, frozen in anticipation, I realized that we were on the verge of something big, something that could change everything we thought we knew about the world. But what was it? And were we ready for it? The creatures began to move away from the crystal, their eyes never leaving ours. It was like they were waiting for us to understand something. Dr. Lawrence looked at us, her face puzzled. I think they're trying to show us something else, she said softly. We followed them through the temple, our lights casting shadows on the walls. They led us to a large stone door hidden behind a tapestry of glowing plants. The creatures touched the door, and it slid open with a creak. Beyond it was a room filled with strange devices and machines. They looked old, like they hadn't been used in years. Dr. Lawrence's eyes widened. This is incredible. It's some kind of laboratory. As we explored the room, I saw devices that looked like they were meant to control the water flow and temperature. It was like they were trying to manage their environment. Suddenly it clicked. They're not just creatures, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They're trying to survive. They're adapting to the changes in their world. Dr. Lawrence nodded. Yes, and they're trying to tell us something. They want us to understand that we're connected. What happens to them affects us too. The creatures looked at us, their eyes serious. It was like they were asking for our help. But how could we help them? And what did it mean for us? As we stood there trying to make sense of it all, I realized that we were at a crossroads. We could choose to help these creatures, or we could leave them to fend for themselves. The decision wasn't easy. But as I looked at those glowing eyes, I knew what I had to do. We have to help them, I said, my voice firm. We have to find a way to stop the changes that are hurting them. Dr. Lawrence nodded. I agree. But how? The creatures seemed to sense our resolve. They began to move towards us, their movements slow and deliberate. It was like they were saying, thank you. And in that moment, I felt a strange sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could make a difference. But as we turned to leave, I heard a faint rumbling sound. It was like thunder, but it wasn't coming from the sky. What's that? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. I looked at Dr. Lawrence, and she shook her head. I don't know, but I think we're about to find out. The rumbling grew louder, and the water began to churn. It was like something was coming, something big. And then everything went dark.